Good evening and welcome to tonight's Hearthstone half hour. I'm Hammy, this is FailCraft Casts. Hope you're well and good this Monday. It's Monday, so it is a new player Monday, or deck guide Monday. So without further ado, we'll jump into what we always do on Monday. We find a deck that we've been playing against or get a bit interested in. We run through how it's built together, and then we try it out in a couple of casual games or trying it out on the ladder just to see how it goes. So the whole idea of knowing that your enemy, knowing different heroes, knowing different deck types, and just getting familiar with the game is always useful. If you're a bit confused by something, there's nothing better than to try and play as it to see how it plays, how you can work against it, and how it works against your deck too. Today, as you can probably see by this slightly fearsome undead mage, the undead don't get a great press in the World of Warcraft, so let's take a non-human, or a human but slightly zombified hero, and we'll have a mage for our cover image today. So as we jump off of that undead magey slate and jump straight into game, we are going to be looking at Aggro Mage today. So Aggro Mage, as we pull up our Aggro Jet, for want of a better name, Aggro Mage is an interesting one. Mages just have such a solid set of kit in Hearthstone, for want of a better word. They have some such strong cards, they've got good control, they've got good burst damage, they've got some good draw power, so there are just so many good reasons for playing Mage. Mage, even before Hearthstone officially released, was strong in the test seasons. There were various tweaks. You had a few tweaks to do with various freeze mechanics and similar. There was also a tweak to Pyroblast, the big 10 damage nuke mage spell as well. So although tweaked, I wouldn't say they're out of favour, but they're just not one of the most popular decks kicking around right now. However, they can still be so strong. So one variant we have seen turn up in the lower to sort of mid bits of the ladder. We're only sitting on rank 12, 11 at the moment, but these have gone all the way to Legend. It's an Aggro Mage deck, and tonight we're going to be looking at Razwa, and we shall not only link him in the chat, but if you're watching it on YouTube, we will link this in the description. This is the deck that we are looking at this evening, and it is an Aggro Mage deck. Now, there are lots of different kinds of Aggro Mage. This also we've described as budget, and the reason for that is that it's only 2,500 or so dust to craft, so it's a very strong deck, and Razor has taken this all the way to Legend. He has admittedly, or she has admittedly, worked this deck from rank 5 to Legend, so we'll give you this deck with the caveat that you need to take a look at the kind of metagame that you're playing in. It's always worth having one or two decks you're really, really happy with, strong with, happy to play with, because at the end of the day, being happy, strong and knowledgeable in how to play your deck will make up for a lot of bad matchups on occasion. If you're good with your deck and your opponent is not good with their deck, sometimes that can go against a matchup. However, when you get to the higher ends of the ladder, like Razor here, sometimes you find yourself having 2 or 3 decks, and you may find yourself playing a bunch of a particular deck. Let's say a bunch of Zoo Warlocks. If that deck is very popular at that time you're playing, you might change to something that beats them, so it can become stone, paper, scissors. Okay, Aggro Mage. What is the concept of Aggro Mage? Really, there are a couple of different ones. There is an Aggro Mage that throws everything at you in the early game, pretty similar to sort of a rushy type deck. And then there's also an aggro-ish mage that has a bit of control but tries to effectively build up behind big tanking minions, tries to trade, controls in sort of the early mid game, and then just starts throwing big spells at you until you fall over. So we're going to look at this reasonably cheap variant. First cards in this deck, 2 Arcane Missiles. People do not like Arcane Missiles for its randomness, 3 damage randomly among enemy characters, but for 1 mana or 0 mana, if you have a Sorcerer's Apprentice down, this is such a damage and mana efficient card for the damage. 3 damage for 0 mana if you've got Sorcerer's Apprentice down. If you've got a low health minion in the early game, it can make the difference between life and death. Do not underestimate an Arcane Missiles. Next up, we're going to drop in a couple of Isolants. Now, this is great damage. This deck uses it as great damage. Generally, you want to use an Isolance after a Frostbolt, and you want to be using those two, if possible, as sort of nuke damage on the enemy hero. You freeze with a Frostbolt, and then you follow up for 1 mana, doing 4 damage. If you're in a pinch and you've had to Frostbolt a big minion, you can follow up with an Isolance to again do 4 damage instead. So it's comboing that with a freeze that gives you the good damage efficiency. And again, like Arcane Missiles, for the 1 mana you could be doing 4 damage, but you don't want it to become a dead card, so ideally follow that up after a freeze. That is the purpose of that. Next up, Mirror Image. 2 of those. Ludicrously good early game war. For 1 mana, you're throwing out 2 0/2 minions that are awkward to remove. And in the early game, if you throw that out in the early game and it's a starting card in your hand, very awkward for people to remove. It's kind of control-y. You can protect your turn 1 mana worm, any low HP minions, or you can stall your enemy while you're about to throw some fireballs in their face. So nothing bad about Mirror Image. It feels like a stally control-y card, but it's got a lot of different uses. And next we have 2 mana worm. This card is a pain if you're playing against it. 1 mana, if you ideally want one of these in your first hand at all times. There's pretty much no matchup where not having a mana worm as a mage is good in this particular deck in turn 1. Basically, if you throw out the coin, it suddenly has 2/3, and you can accelerate with the coin if you're playing second. Whenever you cast a spell, this gains 1 attack. Loads and loads of stuff you can do. And then, of course, if you throw out like a mirror image, for example, then you can have 2 cards protecting it in the early game. Really, really nice. Opponents will always try and sort of gun for the mana worm and try and get rid of it. So for the mana that it costs and for what you can potentially do with it, really, really solid basic card. 2 Frostbolts next. As we mentioned with Ice Lance, Frostbolt you really want to be using on your opponent's hero if you can, but there will be situations where you use it as control to get rid of a minion. This again, with a lot of aggro decks, it's always those decisions between whether to trade a minion or to go for the enemy's face and do the damage to the hero. There will be differences between life and death. 2 Sorcerer's Apprentice. This is a 2/3/2, so for 2 mana, 3 attack, 2 health. That is just a really solid table drop, a really solid spine minion, as I've described them on previous episodes. Really, really awesome, strong card. Your spells also cost 1 less, so if you can get this down and keep it alive and start throwing spells, you're just going to be doing more damage more quickly. Like we've said before, 0 Arcane Missiles, 0 Ice Lance, 0 Mirror Image. You get the picture. Free spells are great, and throwing lots of them in 1 turn, even better. If all else fails and you have to drop that turn 2 just as a 3 attack and 2 health minion, do so. It will just make your deck easier. You don't have to save it for throwing down spells, though of course if you can, it is better. So, in terms of our core Mage Kit, before we go on to the neutrals, 2 Arcane Intellect, nothing much to say here. This deck does not have huge amounts of draw power. Arcane Intellect is really the only draw power in this deck, but bar 1 other card which we'll talk about in a bit. But 3 mana, 2 cards, you're going to be throwing that down if you're desperate for cards in the late game, or you're trying to pull a nuke card for the win. Earlier in the game you're probably less likely to use this unless you have a lack of options, but generally in most mage decks it's a really solid draw power card. 2 Arcane Intellect, in we go. Next up, hang on, I don't want an Ice Barrier. I've just noticed that I have gold Arcane Intellect, so why have normal when we can have gold? Lovely. Next, I'm looking for Fireball, there we go, 2 Fireballs. And in 2 Fireballs, there's nothing much to say about Fireball. For 4 mana, 6 damage, it is the Mage Nuke card. It is where you stick the damage in. Good to see you folks. A big welcome to Legion, Christu, Mitsuyu, and other various noble soldiers of King Ooze who have joined us this evening. Always great to have you guys live. Fireball, without me getting distracted too much, is basically the Mage Nuke. You want this to be hitting your opponent in the face for 6 damage, maybe 7 damage if you've got your Blood Mage Thanos out, but we'll come on to the Blood Mage in a little bit. It is a nuke. You don't really want to be using that against your opponent's minions unless it is a do or die situation. And finally, an interesting choice, this one, by our friend Rezoir, but 2 Water Elementals. Now, this is a basic card. The reason why this deck is so fun and so strong for comparatively low mana. Water Elemental, again, it doesn't feel very aggro-y, only 3 attack, only 6 health, yet that freeze ability has annoyed a lot of people into submission. If you're playing against a deck that plays with weapons and you're freezing the hero every turn, they're not going to be swinging with weapons. That Paladin's not going to be swinging, Warrior is not going to be swinging, the Druid is not going to be swinging. It gets really annoying really, really quick. And with the 6 health, he's quite hard to beat down. He's quite tanky with, and as a result, he can almost take a hit from pretty much any minion. But the freeze is the really, really, really strong thing. You can freeze a giant. You can sort of delay bigger minions for 1 turn. That may be the difference between win and defeat. And of course, the freeze will also set up your Ice Lance as well. So don't forget that freeze is handy too. That rounds out in our sort of Aggro Mage deck that we're taking a look at and deck teching today, the Mage cards. So let us jump into the neutral cards. And our first option is All Hail the Leper Gnome. He is a twofer if you're a fan of 30 Rock. 2 damage to enemy hero. If you can attack for 2, he will do some damage. He'll trade for a minion and he'll do damage to the hero's face as well. Get it down in the early game, put on pressure. Not much to say about that. It is a standard aggro card. The Arcane Berserker, what if this chap gets in? Now he's so good because if your opponent damages him, he gets 5 attack, or you as a mage, of course, for your 2 mana can ping him yourself. You can just do 1 damage yourself with your hero ability, and voila, you have a 5 attack minion. Throw him down, throw him in your enemy's face. Nothing too subtle about the Arcane Berserker's purpose in life. Next, Blood Mage Thalnos. Now this is a nice handy little card. The spell damage, of course, gives a little bit of extra reach to all of those mage spells that you have already, so never a bad pick. And really, you've got lots of burst spells. If he dies, then you can draw a card. He's got perfect synergy with your spells. It's all good. You could perhaps swap him for card draw or more spell tap power, depending on where you want to play a deck. But if you're going to craft a legendary for this deck, the Blood Mage is the chap. He has a nice dual functionality there that really helps you either way. Next, interesting, but again, when we talk about solid drops or solid spine cards of a deck, the Fairy Dragon in any aggro deck, so handy. But again, the fact that he can't be targeted by spells or hero powers means that he has to be killed with a minion. You're throwing him down turn 2, he is guaranteed to trade something good, to do some damage, cause some problems before he passes away. So never a bad choice. And of course in this deck, in the early game, you're going to be doing some aggro, putting some pressure on with him as well. The knife, not the kive, is it the knife? I cannot type today. Let's go for knife. There we go. 2 knife jugglers. Knife juggler, if you are crafting your initial sets of cards, an invaluable rare. Summoning a minion, do 1 damage to a random enemy. He does chip damage to swarm decks, so if you're being zooed, if you're being hunted, if murlocked, if anyone's throwing down lots of little minions against you, you throw down a life juggler and start throwing down minions back. He starts chipping away, doing some damage. Mirror Mage, of course, you know, for 1 mana you summon 2 minions, play that after a knife juggler, it does another 2 damage. So opponents will target the knife juggler and they'll try and remove it, but in your deck that is fine, because you're probably going to be able to remove some of their threats as well. Now this is an interesting play, and again, in terms of a Razoir's sort of choices, I've typed in delicate, but I actually meant cold light. But you certainly have to be delicate with the way that you play this card. Cold Light Oracle. Now you may have seen this in some Miracle Road decks or other decks, so you can see that battle cry. Now if you play this at the wrong time, you do not play Cold Light Oracle in this deck just to get cards, because you're giving your opponent 2 cards. Now don't underestimate the benefit, of course, that giving your opponent 2 cards can create. Giving your opponents 2 cards could take them from having a game lost into a game salvaged, or an even game into a winning game, particularly against decks like Miracle Rogues, who play this card themselves to accelerate their own deck draw in some situations. So against Zoo, Miracle Rogue, unless they've got a full hand and you can make them burn 2 cards, then you don't really want to play it. Any deck that revolves, you know, if you're playing a Zoo Warlock and they draw another 2 low mana cost minions, then you're basically handing them the game or handing them an advantage. So in this, it's kind of, you know, a very situational card, but if your opponent's got a lot of cards anyway and you need to catch up, that's the kind of situation where you play Cold Like Oracle. So I'm 50-50 about that one. I can see its uses, but it's certainly a delicate one to play. Play it wrong and that could lose you the game, and there are some safer alternatives, so make of that what you will. Next we will go for the Wolf. There is not much to say about the Wolf Rider, bar the fact that he charges into the face for 3 damage. You will use him to smack your opponent in the face. And most of the time, that will be the optimum play. Take it, charge to the face, and do some damage. So that will all be well and good. Not massive subtlety, so that is all good. And then last but not least, interesting choice here, but again I get this one, is the late game Azure Drake. Now, you notice that our mana curve as we look at this deck is all weighted in the early game, so you can see we're a rush deck there, look. But what does the Drake do? Well, he is kind of a beefy Thalnos is the way that Razor has described it, and that's exactly it. You get the draw card, you get the additional spell damage, and he might be able to trade against something, you know, in the late game. You might be able to use him to chip away at a tank, a minion or similar to set up the board. So that is our deck. That is our Aggro Jet. I'm going to screenshot that because I am just going to quickly, if the gods of image manipulation programs allow, grab a screenshot. I'm just going to throw that in the left column for you, so as we play a couple of games you can see how this works out. Okie dokie, so that is our first part of our sort of new player Monday stroke deck breakdown, deck tech analysis. We have taken a deck we've seen a bunch of, we've been playing against Aggro Mage, we have built it card by card, but note that when you deck list, as we've said before in the Hearthstone half hour, you want to make sure that you understand how the deck is working and how it's trying to play. So there is our deck list. How is it trying to play? Well, if we look at that mana curve, in the early game we are trying to set up threats, set up walls if we can, with things like mirror image. We have cards to attack our opponent in the face quickly. We can throw down spells and make the most use of our mana worm. We can ping and attack with our Armani Berserker, but above all we want to do as much damage to our opponent's hero as possible whilst keeping the board under some semblance of control. By the time we get to turn 4 or 5, we really should be looking at being close within a win or having the deck dominated. If this deck goes into the late game, you can see we have 0 late game cards. A lot of our cards do a reasonable amount of damage, but we're not set up to deal with hugely filled boards or anything like that. So if we're playing against swarms, we need to make sure we keep control. If we're playing against a late game deck, we need to end the game before it gets to the late game. So next step, let us jump into casual mode. And if you're testing out new decks, new concepts, new things like that, do not be afraid of casual mode. What you really want to do is just experiment, have some fun, and there is no penalty for losing whatsoever. So get in there and see if your deck works or not. Okie dokie. Due to a very busy month, it is very unlikely again that in the remaining 7 days I'm probably going to get close to Legend. I may not even try, so we may throw this into some ladder games as well, see how it goes in a ladder context. So we have a rogue. A rogue is game 1. Let's see what we got. Okay, well, starting hand-wise, that's not bad. I mean, Frostbolt I could hang on to in case I see what's going. I'm going to toss the Fireball because that's a finisher. I'd probably like some earlier game cards, so I'm going to keep 2. And I'm going to mulligan to see if I can get something like a Taunt or a Mirror Image. Hey, you know what? 2 Mana Worms, a Knife Juggler. I've got some nasty threats there to make our rogue consider otherwise. Now, we don't know what this rogue's playing right now. What options do we have turn 1? Well, we can throw down the Mana Worm. I could coin out a Knife Juggler. He might go aggressive to try and remove that. But then throwing down the Mana Worm will stop the chip damage. Alternatively, I can throw down 2 Mana Worms with my coin and then turn 2 move into a Frostbolt. So I think I'm going to try this way. There we go. And we already have 1 powered up Mana Worm, thanks to me throwing down the coin. So if I'd managed to drop both of those in the coin, it would have been even more dangerous, of course. Could have saved those for a turn. Dagger Mastery comes out, he will go for a straight backstab. There we go. He's going to remove the dangerous one of the 2. And there we go for the attack. I can deal with that. Okay, choices. Well, spells will cost 1 less, but I'm not going to be able to throw down that Frostbolt. It probably makes sense that I just throw down a Knife Juggler and proceed to attack with my Mana Worm. Keeping the pressure on, he will now be staring at this Knife Juggler and thinking, how do I remove this? The threats will build up quite quick. Next turn I can throw down my Sorcerer's Apprentice and then Frostbolt. That will buff this up. That will do 1 chip damage. He's replaced his weapon. Deadly Poison will let him remove 1 of these. I'm guessing he's going to go for the Knife Juggler. There we go. So, although the Knife Juggler died as we expected, it is forcing him to use his control on those particular cards. So, options. Well, Sorcerer's Apprentice is a fair one. Note that that drops my Frostbolt to 1. I'm just going to throw that straight up there because it will buff my Mana Worm. Would have been better, as I discussed before, if I had an Ice Lance to follow it up with, but you can note that he's got his dangerous weapon, that he's deadly poisoned. I've frozen him, so he's not removing those for another turn. And next turn, I've got some options as well. He does charge with the South Sea Deckhand and removes in a nice solid trade. Even with the Eviscerate, he's gone for very hard control. He could still be playing a Miracle Rogue, let's make that clear. However, we're not seeing it quite yet. So there's nothing wrong with my next follow-up. I'm just going to throw these down, save that Sorcerer's Apprentice just in case, but I can do the chip and make him choose. He's taking damage next turn, whatever he decides. Now at turn 5, if we're playing a Miracle Rogue, we would be looking for the Gadgets and Auctioneer, or a similar play to come out at this point. So let us keep an eye and see what's going on there. His own Leponome comes out to put some pressure on, bit of an Eviscerate down similarly, so there is pressure going out there. Let's keep an eye and see what's coming out. Swing in there, he's gone for the hard control with both an Eviscerate doing 4 damage and then also swinging away with his hero. But of course you can see that he's taken table control. So what are now my options? Well, I've got my finisher and Fireball, but I don't want him to draw a card. I don't mind taking some damage. I'll force him to trade if he wants to make the draw. I'm going to keep the Fireball in hand. I'm going to remove the Leponome. Now, he may well decide that he wants to go for the trade. Throwing that Sorcerer's Apprentice down may have been a slight error, because that would have let me play the cheaper Fireball next turn. So we will work this out as we go along. He's gone for the trade, taken the draw. In retrospect, maybe we should have held up that Sorcerer's Apprentice. The Assassin's Blade comes in, so that will let him control any of my little minions. He's just going to hit me in the face now. So we're in a good position here, but we really need just to pull the cards out to see the game home. Fireball, I want to save as my late game finisher, so I'm going to throw down the Drake. Shouldn't have hit end turn. That could have been a 1 mana card I could have played. But Arcane Intellect, that'll let me draw. We can swing him to the face. We'll do 7 with that Fireball. We are very nearly within kill range. And with the SI7 agent, and he's taken it to the face himself to keep the pressure on. Now I can sort of tip my hand here by throwing down an Armani Berserker and encouraging him to go for the trade. I don't really want to allow him to draw that card. First thing I think I'll go for is an Arcane Intellect. Arcane Missiles, aha! So now we have some options. Okay, so Arcane Missiles will let me almost remove everything. The Ice Lance will just let me freeze a character so it's not going to attack. There is no way that I can pick everything off the table. 6 damage, ooh, if I had a clear table that would be game. But I can't clear all of these in one go, I think. Let's work it out. I can ping my own Armani Berserker. I can let him draw a card with the Arcane. I'm going to go for a risk. Interesting. Okay. In that case, I've forced him on the draw. I'm going to throw down an Ice Lance so he can't trade with that hero. I have lethal next go. If he doesn't heal, I have the lethal. So by freezing this card in this situation, it's just so he can't trade away my Armani Berserker too easily. Okay, he's taken the backstab. And the SI7 agent trades it away. I've still got lethal with the amount of mana I have. So we will say good game to our opponent. And oh, just make sure we don't misclick here. And there goes our finisher. Well played. So that's a pretty simple example of an Aggro Mage. Now we were playing that, of course, in a ladder casual situation, so that player could have been brand new to the game. He could have been, or she could have been, you know, just starting out, so they might have had some very basic cards. They might not have had a Miracle Rogue whatsoever. We don't know what level that player was at. So is that showing that the Aggro Mage is absolutely brilliant and wonderful in all circumstances? No, but it does show, at least I hope, the basic mechanics of that deck, how you play it, and a few of the basics as to how you can go through. So now we've gone into ladder, and oh, we've got a mirror match. Let us see what we have. Okay, so how should we play this up against a mage in terms of mirror? Okay, so I think really it's just going to be a question of who gets control earliest and who gets the best cards down earliest. Leponome, all of this is pretty solid. I'm tempted to throw back the Arcane. I am going second, so that will give me some options. The mana worm I can coin into with some nice options. I'm going to... I want a mirror image. I feel that that will give me additional protection. I'm going to risk it, and I'm going to toss back these two, hoping for a mirror image. I've almost got the exact same hand back. Okay, so let's see what happens here. So what could this mage be playing? He could be playing something very similar to us. So let's just see how it goes. First up, let's see if he goes for an aggro. Wall-mounted iPads in the chat. Craziness, this modern technology. And there we go, that's what we were looking for. He's managed to get out his mirror image. The arcane will probably... Will it pick us off? Not quite. 2 to the hero is not what we mind at this point in time. The mana worm. Okay, we've got options here, so I can loop it down. I can then throw this out. That makes me powerful and dangerous. In this situation, I'm actually just going to get the tanks out the way nice and quick. Reason for that, throwing down the spell along with that coin. He's not going to be able to on turn 3. There goes the Wolf Rider, which will charge in and remove one of those. But it still keeps me on the front foot, which is good. Now I can start swinging away with my own Wolf Riders, or I can put the card advantage down with Arcane Intellect and draw the cards. Arcane Intellect would have buffed me up for more damage, perhaps would have been a good play. I'm just going to swing in and start putting pressure on. Remember that if he is playing a mirror deck to us, which looks quite likely at this point, then really it's a question of whoever gets out the door and gets control of the board most quickly. Welcome to Blue! Blue99, good to see you with us. And there goes the Fire Blast, just to remove the 1 minion. How can I continue putting this pressure down? Well, let's throw down a Knife Juggler, let's throw down a Leponome for the 1 chip damage, and then let's swing in with our continuing Mana Worm. Pressure, 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 minions, minions, minions. Remember, no flame strikes, no AoE in this mage deck. I don't think he's going to... If he has a wild pyromancer or anything similar, that would be an interesting tech play. Remember that the wild pyromancer does 1 damage to all minions whenever a spell is played by yourself. And that's a good play. Interesting. Frost Nova. Certainly slows everything up. And there you go. He takes away the Leponome to do the 2 damage. So what this really means is that he's slowed me down a turn. What I can, however, do now is make my... I can really make this a threat. Aha! That is a nice set of cards to draw. So it's a shame that we don't have a Sorcerer's Apprentice down, because that means we could throw some free spells about. But what we can do is either freeze the hero. Well, that doesn't really do anything against the mage, of course, so it will just be doing the 3 damage. We're not going to Ice Lance combo for that additional 7 damage. That is our finisher at this point in time, note. So really, the sensible play here is Mirror Image. Really, anything that he decides to... Ooh, there we go. And note that the 2 Mirror Image mages do the 2 chip damage from the Knife Juggler. Now, we have a lethal next turn. We've got 7 damage there. Follow that up with a... 5 damage and a 3, so that's 15. Nearly a lethal, but 2 mirror images get in our way. Fire Blast, chipping away because he wants to get rid of that. Unless he's got a Cone of Cold or something similar. Okay, we're held up a turn, but we can still push our way through. So, what is good? Well, can we remove these with our minions? Yes, we can. The Frostbolt and Ice Lance, we really want to play on that mage if possible. We've got 6. I'm just trying to think of, can we remove... If I drop the Wolf Rider, that gives me 1 chip to the hero, very nice. We then drop these 2, which is fine. Now, if I throw those down for 7, we're just going to be slightly short. But watch, 3 damage to a character and freeze. And then we can follow up with an Ice Lance. Oh, look at that, we're 1 damage short. Just 1 damage. Now, playing those 2 spells, obviously, before the Mana Worm, buffed it up to that stage of scariness. So, again, play order with this deck, kind of important. Welcome to Lasky! Time no see! There goes the Cold Light Oracle that we mentioned before. You notice that our opponent with 1 health remaining has to tap on the table and mulligan. So, that's a nice second game. And hey, you know what? In a ladder situation, that actually worked too. That pushed us up 1. So let us just see if we can sneak in just one more game. Cool, I think we can sneak in just one more. So that was a nice game. So we've played one game against I can't even remember what we played against first. It was a rogue in casual. We thought it might have been some kind of miracle rogue, but remember that when you're playing in casual, you just don't know how new or experienced your opponent is, so it's no offence to them if they do lose, and it's no guarantee that you are going to be number one Hearthstone EU with your current deck, or indeed US or any other geographic area. But casual is the place you should take your new decks to go and practice. Now we have a paladin, we have an aggro-din. What am I doing against aggro-din? Well, I could do with a knife juggler for chipping away against his little minions. I'm not really up for that. Mana Worm is always good to start with. Frostbolt, do I need two? I'm going first. There's not going to be huge amounts of options with that. I could do with a knife juggler. I'll keep the Frostbolt in case anything big comes out. I'm going to risk throwing back one knife juggler. Arcane Intellect, okay, that could be worse. So, a reasonable starting hand. I'm not going to complain too much about that. Turn 1. Let's see what our opponent, we're glorying it up at rank 11 at the moment, has got. So remember this deck, of course, a mere 2,500 or so dust. Nice and cheap if you're a new player. It will require you doing a little bit of arenaing and similar. Okay, a secret goes down. We've covered in Hearthstone half hour, I believe, 50 as to how to look at secrets and play with them. So this is probably a noble sacrifice. A noble sacrifice will summon a 2-1 defender whenever I attack, so I may as well just try and get that out of the way. The knife juggler will set me up for other options. I'm probably not going to get anything, so I just want to... Ooh, interesting. Now you notice that I charged in thinking that was a noble sacrifice. It wasn't. So let's take a look at the Paladin secrets. Okie dokie. Our Harvest Golem has gone down. Solid twofer. Let's see what we've got. Well, I've played a minion and my minion's health was not reduced to 1. That means my Paladin's sacrifice is not repentance. An eye for an eye. When your hero takes damage, deal that much damage to the enemy hero. Well, that didn't happen either. So it's not eye for an eye. There must be redemption. So when my opponent's minions dies, it will be returned to life with 1 health. So I've broken that down because I've attacked him, I've played a minion, and I've done damage to his hero. So because no secret triggered on our paladin for 3 of those, then I've ruled out 3 out of 4 secrets. So knowing your opponent's secrets really is the way to try and to play around them. I'm just going to link paladin secrets in the chat for those who are wondering, just to work out how we did that little bit of linking around and working around. Okay, to the business at hand. So interesting. Well, if I kill this, will it return to life with 0 health? There's only one way to find out. I'm actually going to frostbolt him. Is that going to return to life with health? There we go. Interesting. So that actually rebirths it and summons a new one. That's quite annoying. So what can I do? I'm actually just going to take the damage attack. I'll put the pressure on. That's frustrating. Nice little play there. Nice little paladin combo. You can actually rebirth your golems, so that means you swarm with these golems. He can therefore just trade me straight off the deck and still have 3 mana to play. There goes his reinforce. I have not seen that before. Nice little combo for you guys to keep an eye on. Okie dokie. Wow, I've got some mean plays here. The Wolf Rider will let me charge straight to his face, but the Water Elemental really will, against an aggro deck such as his, make him think. Because he's not going to be able to chip that away with anything too easily. He will have to buff hard. There we go. The bubble will let him attack twice, but he will freeze. Reinforce. He's going for the swarm. This is where this aggro paladin style is going to start just trying to hit me to the face. He's going to try and get more minions down than me and really get the table overbuffed. Now I just need to make sure I keep this situation under control. Throwing down another water elemental will really strengthen my position. So I'm just going to remove the bigger minion. and keep it down. I will want to freeze his hero as soon as possible, but these, because of their big bodies, their big amounts of health that they have, will let me chip away against his small minions lots and pretty quick. But there goes the Blessing of Kings. That will pick one of my minions off the table, and there we go. A nice trade, leaving him with his big minion. So now, you know, remember before when I said that fireballs are really generally you want to put pressure on your opposing hero? Do you know what? Here's a situation where I probably don't want that to happen. I could throw down at Arcane Missiles for the random factor. I might get 3 down on him. I could then throw in a Wolf Rider. That might work. But what I really want to do is be sure. So to be sure, I'm actually going to fireball that hero. Arcane Missiles then does a solid 3. And then I freeze him. Now, freezing a paladin in an aggro situation is important because he has the wonderful True Silver Champion. 4 attack, 2 durability on that weapon, and then every time you swing it heals your paladin for 2. I don't want him to be swinging weapons. He's summoning enough little minions to irritate me as it is. He's going for the... Oh, that was fortunate of him. He managed to luck out. That could have been 1. Very fortunate. But hey, this is a card game, so therefore luck is part of it. Right, I've got 7 mana, so firstly I'm going to throw down Arcane. I just need to see what I've got as options. Nice! So throwing down the Sorcerer's Apprentice will mean that I can play a free Mirror Image. But then I will only have 2 left, so I can't play a Wolf Rider and charge. But throwing down the tanks, I can throw down a Leper Gnome as well. Let's throw down the Sorcerers. Let's jump into 2 Mirror Image, so we fill my board nice and full. I'm going to throw down the Leper Gnome. I've got a Wolf Rider in hand. That puts me in a very solid aggro position for next turn. So, a nice play. I could have done more damage to the face. Consecrate. Of course, Consecrate was going to come. Well played. That is the danger of Paladin. I should have thought of that. I have no weapon to destroy, so his ooze. Traitor ooze. It's not our ooze, therefore it must be a traitor. So, I'm going to trade that down. In fact, I should have probably done damage to the hero. He can just trade me straight away if he wants. Reasons for saving Fireball. Paladin has Lay on Hands. Heal 8 health, draw 3 cards, I believe it is, for something like 8 mana. We are in Paladin Lay on Hands territory with the amount of health and mana that he has. So there goes the Hammer of Wrath. He's certainly not doing anything else for the time being. You can see that my card draw is now suffering. If I get a Cold Light Oracle, that's when I'm going to have to start playing it. Still swarming away. I'm not quite within kill range yet. Well, second Arcane turns up just in time. The Azure Drake gives me options. The Fireball I still need to hold in hand. I'm not going to be able to ping anything off the table too quick. The Battle Cry of drawing a card followed by throwing up more taunts will slow him down nicely. He's going to have to kill these unless he pulls out another Consecrate, and if so, we may as well say almost, but not quite a good game. Now, do bear in mind, I've got 7 damage on the table. There we go, 7-5. Argus comes up, very nice. He's going to be able to chip 2 of my tanks away, then take out my Ooze. I do have the Fireball, which I'm going to have to use to remove that scary card. Remember that I've got no AoE, so this is now quite a dangerous situation for me. I can throw in all of these to get some table removal going, and I will probably need to do that, sadly. So I'm going to have to go for some element of control now. Sadly, that Ooze, I just can't live. I've had to use both my Fireballs on trying to get the table under control. So this Paladin is doing a really good job of out-aggroing me. This is aggro versus aggro mirror, and this Paladin is always one step ahead. So I'm using all of my damage spells that I should be using, and there we go. Alexstrasza, you see that as a drop in a lot of decks, drops me down to health and pulls me within aggro finishing range. So I'm going to have to Ice Lance Alex. I'm going to have to try and get damage on to poke him off, and really this is probably game now. Because we've got to the late game, you've seen the mana curve of my deck. All of our spells are in the early game. We've not managed to finish our Paladin off in the early game, and he has managed to aggro well in the early game and zoom through to the late game, where cards like Alexstrasza are just going to mean that he's well set up for a victory. So, 1 up, 1 down, and win some, lose some. That is the way of ladder. Doing the ladder shuffle. Because we are pretty much all of our cards mana 1 through 5 mana cost, a Leper Gnome is not going to do much for us at this point in time. Let's do a 1 damage to Alexstrasza. We should light a fire. Let's shake out this mat to say it goes white. And you know, I'm not being a bad-mannered person here. I just want to make this skin rug on top of this tent go white. If you click it enough, it will. Hooray, there we go, it changed over. Let's create a rainbow. There's a nice rainbow for you. I'll make the gem fall out of the chap's eye. There's a tiger in there that also comes out. And last but not least, we can chop some of the vines as well. So either our opponent has gone AFK, or no, there we go. About to say, could it be that he disconnected, or she had disconnected? That is not the case. One up, one down. We're sitting on rank 11, but a couple of wins, a couple of losses. That is the way of things. So thank you so much for tuning in to tonight's Hearthstone half hour. What have we done tonight? Well, we have taken a look at the Aggro Mage that has been up and down and has done various sort of rounds on the ladder, probably for the last few seasons. Mage has always been popular. It's fallen in, fallen out of favour. You will not see it hugely as you're laddering up in favour of other sort of more solid aggro decks, but we've taken a look at that list, and as I'll just go back to my collection to round it off. We've seen in a couple of games there against the Rogue how we came out early and put some really good pressure on. We saw against some other decks when we didn't get going quite early enough, like that Paladin, where if you get out aggroed in an aggro matchup, you lack the control against something like a Zoo Warlock or anything, or an aggro Paladin like that. You can't control forever. If you haven't really won and killed their hero and finished the game by a certain point in time, you're probably going to lose. But there are cards in there and plays that can make that happen, and you can have clutch plays like Cold Like Oracle trying to draw cards in the late game. You've got nice combos, you can throw down cards and get additional spell damage. There's a lot to be said. If this deck fires off in the early to mid game, it will shred through things. However, as with all Hearthstone decks, it will only be good in a certain metagame and against certain decks. If you're playing a very, very heavy aggro metagame, you may find that other decks such as Shaman Rushes or, I don't know, Murlocs, Zoo decks, Paladin aggro, Warrior aggro, similar, will be equally challenging to play against. So that is our list, and that is our Hearthstone half hour for tonight. Quick sign off. After streams, we may or may not do some silent streaming, so if we do, we will tweet and let you know, or we'll shout in the chat. But where can you find us? Well, Mondays like today, if you're tuning in on Twitch, fabulous, you can find us at youtube.com/FailCraft Casts. Our complete archive of videos is there and streams, loads of deck guides like the one we've done tonight and similar things. So if you fancy some Hearthstone deck inspiration, also League of Legends, StarCraft and other video games too, go check it out. If you're watching this on YouTube, twitch.tv/FailCraft Casts. We try and stream 4 to 5 nights a week. Monday nights like tonight are New Player Monday / Deck Garage, where we break down decks and analyse them, get to know our enemy, get to know the game a bit more. Tuesday, you pick an arena class for us to play, an arena hero, you pick all of the cards live on stream, and then we play a couple of games, pick your own arena fun. Wednesday's ladder. I'll do some ladder and we'll analyse both the deck I'm playing at the time in ladder, the kind of rung I am, however high or low I am, and what decks are coming out at that rank, as well as our opponents, how they are playing, what kind of decks are they playing, and just getting a feel for competitive Hearthstone. Thursday is either Tactics Thursday, we'll play some intermediate or advanced games or tactics, go through a few more advanced concepts, but there's still stuff for new and intermediate players too. And then Friday is Fun Friday. It'll either be just totally fun Hearthstone, we'll play games against you guys, viewers on the stream, or just play other games for fun. So there we have the Twitch schedule. Last sign off's website, failcraft.org, all of the videos, written stuff around them, new player resources and links, stuff that doesn't go in video, and last but not least, Twitter, at FailCraft Casts. Tweet us whatever time, wherever in the world you are. If we're asleep, we're probably not going to answer, but the rest of the day we will try and get back to you. Love to have a chat about all sorts of things. So that will be our sign off. Always pointing out that it's not the quickest sign off in the world. Finally, a last ask for you this evening before you go your different ways and before you go off to do whatever gaming you're going to do. Please, 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 if you like it, like what we do, please share it, let us know what we can do better, or if you like stuff, let us know what that is so we can do more of it. If you're not a massive fan, then again, please just let us know if there's things you think we can do to improve our streaming or casting. We just want to make better content for everyone to enjoy. So thank you for tuning in. Hopefully see you tomorrow night or soon on a FailCraft